Hello, it is Dr. DeShava. We are back in the home stretch for skin or integumentary system and function. And wounds should be a pretty quick little section for you. When we look at these wounds, these are pretty self-explanatory. There's not even any notes for them. An abrasion, as we know, is when you take sort of like the top layer or two of skin off, as opposed to a laceration where it goes down through skin. You could see probably even some hypodermis there into the fascia or even the muscles there. And that would be, like a knife wound or impaling or something like that on the right. And the right obviously would need the edges approximated so it could heal properly. And when our skin heals, what happens, I said no notes, but I can't help myself, sorry. When we have a laceration that goes this deep, the problem with healing is the hypodermis and the dermis doesn't have the capability of filling in that open space. What does is this epidermis does to a certain extent. So we need to suture this together. Shoot, shoot, shoot. There's my fancy sutures. So those tissues can be approximated and heal. And a whole series of events will happen. First of all, you'll have an inflammatory response to clean things out, and then you'll have a mild inflammatory response to clean up the dead tissue. And macrophages, which are part of our immune system, will come through and eat up those dead tissues, and then we start to regenerate new tissues in those areas. We'll develop more fat down here. Collagen fibers will form in here, as we spoke about with the dermis. And then these epithelial cells will start to fill in and regenerate that area. So that's why we need those sutures, so we can regenerate those tissues. With the abrasion over here, you've taken out this top layer of skin, but these epithelial cells will actually fill this in pretty nicely and work their way from the bottom up with those layers of cells that we spoke about previously. An avulsion is when you rip something off, basically. You can avulse a nail. It's going to be more like you're avulsing a structure. I've heard this more with muscles and tendons coming off of bones. You can actually avulse or rip part of the bone off. And their example here with an avulsion is ripping the nail out of the nail bed. I'm curious. I wonder how that happened. I don't know. Anyway, and then obviously, I think we got that one on the right, is a penetrating wound when some foreign object has passed through our bodies. Burns. Now, burns come in the 3 degrees, so we're going to define them just so we know, and I know this is probably old hat for most of you, but so we know definitively what I'm looking for answers for these 3 levels of burns. So 1st degree burn affects only the epidermis. The skin will become red and swollen, causes pain, pretty superficial. It'll heal pretty quickly. Now 2nd degree starts to move into the dermis. It's a little bit thicker. It's a little more intense, obviously. And your book lists a whole bunch of things that can cause these burns. You can have electrical burns. You can have burns from fire. You can have burns from being in the sun for too long, etc. Okay, we're just going to talk about the outcome. So 2nd degree burns are going to go through the epidermis and the dermis, can cause pain, swelling, redness, and blistering would be a good thing to earmark in your brains for 2nd degree burns. 3rd degree or full thickness burns will extend all the way down through the hypodermis, and we could see all the way down to the fascia or the muscle. Pardon me, can be white or blackened and char the skin. And this is when they lose feeling because you damage all the nerves that are in that area. Eventually it'll be painful, obviously, as they start to heal. So infections we spoke about. The skin is such a great physical barrier for us. Once we lose that barrier, we could get more infections by all these bacteria and viruses that surround us in this world. And we can lose fluids because we don't have that waterproof layer helping to keep fluids in our body. All right, so if we look at a drawn representation, there's superficial or first degree, and you could see it just as red on the skin and goes through that epidermis. Partial thickness or second degree, moving down into the dermis, the epidermis as well, and blistering. And full thickness will go all the way down to the hypodermis. As I said, you could see to the fascia or the muscle underneath. And the full thickness burns. And fascia is, I'm sure you remember, but fascia is a connective tissue that we find underneath the skin on top of the muscle, and it can encase the muscle, and it helps to provide little kind of sub-packaged areas for those muscles. And it's basically a connective tissue with fibers going multiple directions. I'm sure you remember, but just a little refresher. And full thickness is third degree, and that's when it's getting pretty intense. These are people that have to be sent out to special burn units. We had somebody when I was going to chiropractic school. I was studying and went to chiropractic school in Seneca Falls, and he was one of the maintenance men on campus. And for some, this was way back when we were young and stupid, I guess, all of us, they used to use rags with a little bit of gas or kerosene to light, bush on fire. And the fumes had gone out, and he lit the rag, and it just came up the whole front of him. And they had to light, you life flight them, as you guys know, right out to special burn units. He went to upstate, I believe, burn unit, that area. So, and they're going to have to put all the, I know they used to use pig skins. I know that they have special topical ways to cover it. Right now, you guys are probably saying it's this, but as I don't do the actual treatments. I just teach you where to get to from there. And he was in there for quite some time, but they do amazing things. He looked phenomenal and survived, thank God, and ended up okay. So let's practice. These should be super easy. You should know what this is. And if you've read your book, you're like, it's right in the book. But use your brain and tell me, which would this be, first, second, or third? Indeed, it would be first. And I have all the numbers uncovered. And this would be first, second, or third. Third degree. You have the charring, the whiteness. You can't really see what level it's down to, but obviously that's pretty progressed. Here we go with the blisters. Okay, so this would be a second degree burn on this fella. Okay, let's move on to skin cancer. They included acne and rosacea in your book. I think that's pretty straightforward. I'll let you read through that on your own. Of course, once again, the questions for exams will come directly out of these lecture notes. So skin cancer is a near and dear concept and idea for me because I had melanoma 2 years ago. I had a mole that I thought was like a little weird, and I let it go. And then I started to realize when I was putting my body lotion on that it was catching a little bit, and I went, and it's no joke. It's no joke. I think it was, 16 sutures. They have to take such a large chunk out to make sure that the periphery doesn't have any cancer cells. And it's still scary because you still wonder if one of those little buggers didn't sneak out. They're doing great. I just have a colleague who went to Sloan Kettering and got immunotherapy. He had malignant melanoma that had spread and actually had gotten into his skull and a little bit into his brain, and he is now cancer-free. But once again, as we know, finding it early is the key. And especially with melanoma, because it can metastasize, you want to make sure you send people out. Can't hurt to check it out. Oops, sorry about there. Can't hurt to get it looked at, right? So skin cancer, we're going to go through the 3 types. In general, it's an abnormal growth of those cells. We're going to talk about which type of cells in the skin cause the 3 main types of skin cancer. Most frequently occurring cancer in the United States. It's a pretty interesting thought. Most prevalent in males, Caucasians, fair complexion, and those with a familial history. I beg to differ. I've seen people with all sorts of backgrounds have skin cancer. UV exposure, obviously, is an issue. I admit I was a 90s kid and I used to go to the tanning beds. And I really think that's probably what started because my skin cancer was on my upper thigh where I don't get a lot of UV exposure except in that stinking tanning bed. So those things are bad. They really are. And we all know that. So, and they occur in areas that have the most skin exposure. I beg to differ yet again. This is what your book says. And of course, I won't test you differently, but just for your own edification and knowledge. A friend of mine from high school just got diagnosed with, it's either, I think it was labial, like vaginal labial skin cancer. That wasn't exposed to any sun. It happens. So you want to make sure that you tell your patients to check areas and to be cautious and get anything that looks weird checked. So 3 types is basal squamous and melanoma, which is on the next page. I just couldn't fit them in. So basal cell is going to develop from the basal layer in the epidermis, which is the bottom layer of cells. And it really metastasizes. Same thing with squamous cell. The one that really metastasizes is melanoma. And basal cell presents with this really, it looks roundish usually and shiny, which your book doesn't note, but I would note that round and shiny, and I'll develop from those basal cells. But once again, it's a little round, shiny, raised area in the skin that wasn't there before. So once again, you want to look for those changes in the skin. Excuse me. Squamous cell carcinoma. My grandmother, God rest her soul, did not die from it. She died from kidney cancer. But she had squamous cell, and it presented as flaky skin. I actually put a picture in for you because your book doesn't have a good picture of the squamous cell presentation that she had. It was flaky skin. It was on her nose, and she just kept trying to put more lotion on it, and she'd scratch at it. And when they went to remove it, it did spread. Well, maybe it did metastasize. I don't know, because she ended up with kidney cancer. It had spread from the center of her nose all the way down to underneath her left lower cheek and all the way up above the right eyebrow. And the reason I bring this up is I always try to give you stories to help to remember stuff, but that huge scar that was on her face, poor thing, she had a whole bunch of stitches, healed really well. And that's because plastic surgeons are taught where the collagen fibers tend to run the most. And they will, so if you're looking, collagen fibers are these big, fat, juicy protein fibers. I'm going to draw in here that run underneath the skin in certain directions. So say if this was her eyebrow, the collagen fibers, and I'm not certain, would run that way. So when they did the incision, they went that way. So then the skin tends to heal very well because it's put back together. You're not cutting across those lines and creating more scars. I'm going to put in a picture of collagen lines for you. Okay, I believe the actual term is cleavage lines, but I will put in a picture of that for you in your supplemental material. And she healed great. I mean, I can't tell you how many sutures she had, but it was from above her right eyebrow, down across her nose, down to her lower. Poor thing, looked like she was going to scar. She did great because plastic surgeons know where to cut along those cleavage lines to make the incisions heal better. The final type is melanoma that's going to develop in the melanocytes. So it could be a freckle that's there, or if you get a discoloration of the skin that wasn't there. I don't think that's very common, but just as a sidebar, maybe it was a tiny one that expanded over time. It's the least common, but the most serious because it can metastasize and spread to other areas. I also think it tends to be pretty dangerous because we don't find it. Maybe we don't pay attention to it. You don't look at every freckle every day. So when they remove it, usually they'll just do a little punch lesion. They didn't with me. They removed a huge section twice, and I think that was a mistake. But anyway, when I went to another doctor, because I switched after that, they did a little punch lesion, and then they have to do an incision, and I forget the actual amounts. It's pretty wide and it's pretty long to make sure that they harvest as much of that tissue in the surrounding area to test it for cancer, and then they'll test that huge chunk of skin. I know with my second one, I think I had 16 sutures. With my first, I had 24. Very, very small, but still. So I think what they're supposed to do is the punch lesion first, and then they do that larger extraction once they know it's melanoma. If you are looking at a mole that looks weird, send people out, please. I know one of my patients went out. She had melanoma. She came back with a dozen rosins for me. Thank God you saved my life, kind of thing. Can't hurt to have it checked. Okay, so varies widely in appearance, red, crusty, whatever. I want you to remember basal cell is shiny or waxy, tends to be round. So I would make note of this. Okay, so basal cell, type it in for you. Shiny. Squamous cell is scaly. Melanoma, color change or shape change. Okay, I suppose you could get crusty or bleeding on any of them, but the most typical presentation is going to be those three. Okay. So here's your list. This should look familiar. ABCs, ABCDs, I guess we have now. Asymmetry, border irregularity, color variations, diameter larger than 6 millimeter, bleeding growth, changes in appearance over time. And I think that's wonky like that. You send people out. Early detection is great. Diagnosis, prevention, treatment, I sort of popped in there because it was an easy one to do. Listing. I'm not going into a lot of the diagnoses and treatments because there's so much in your book for that. I know you'll be getting into it in the future. This picture, they didn't really label all the separate things. I'm pretty sure this is before and after, perhaps. But the upper left-hand one is kind of that wonky basal cell presentation. Obviously, all these guys, I think these are befores and afters. Okay. I'm not sure if this is a before and after, but basal cell has that shiny type of appearance that we have here. And then, if this mole ends up looking like that, yeesh, okay, that's bad. You want to get things checked out. This is kind of what happened with mine, this last one. So, and then even these, even if they're small, you want to get those checked. I did pop in a picture. I'm trying not to get too much offline. Here's squamous cell carcinoma. It presents with that flaky presentation. Your book didn't have a really good picture of that one, so I wanted to pop that in for you. Okay. Question time. So, yeah, I know I'll stop saying it that way. You're probably like, that's irritating. Which of the following are good ways to detect skin cancer? A, checking for asymmetry, border irregularity, looking for color variations, changes in appearance, watching or testing moles with a diameter larger than 6 millimeters, checking any skin growth that bleeds or will not heal. All of the above. You give me the answer. And this is the end of skin for us. If you have any questions, you let me know, as always, and I will talk to you in the next chapter. Have a fantastic day.